Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the smoky, spice-laced kitchens of medieval Andalusia, where pine nut stews simmer beside stone fountains. And kitchen secrets are guarded more closely than royal jewels. You're surrounded by the clatter of copper pots, the hush of embroidered slippers across mosaic floors, and the heavy scent of cumin and roasted garlic wafting through open courtyards at midnight. Somewhere nearby, a cat is definitely licking a skewer that belonged to a palace official. This is a time when cooks wore robes more expensive than scholars, where the act of stirring a stew was half religious ritual, half espionage. Recipes weren't written down. They were whispered in low voices and passed on like forbidden spells. And pine nuts. Oh, you're about to develop a completely irrational obsession with pine nuts. Sorry in advance. You probably won't survive this, not because it's dangerous, but because the cravings are going to haunt your dreams forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a courtyard lit by hanging lanterns shaped like pomegranates. The air is warm, sticky with the sweetness of dates. You step carefully across patterned tiles, brushing against pots of mint and hyacinth, and the first thing you really hear is a burble, a low, patient bubbling. Coming from a clay pot perched above a lazy fire, that pot is filled with pine nut stew, thick with meat, apricots, and just enough vinegar to make your mouth ache. You're in Cordoba, somewhere around the year 1116, though nobody's checking calendars because everyone's too busy inhaling dinner. The house belongs to a local vizier, a man who insists on hiring only cooks from his family's ancestral village and pays them in gold dirhams and secret immunity from taxes. The vizier has a terrible taste in shoes, but impeccable standards for stew. A teenage kitchen boy is gently stirring the pot with a carved olive wood spoon, whispering the same three-line chant his grandmother taught him, because she swore it made the pine nuts bloom sweeter. He looks over his shoulder every few minutes to make sure no one's watching. He's added something extra tonight, something that wasn't on the ingredient scroll, something citrusy. The kitchens of Al-Andalus aren't just about food, they're about drama. Here, a good cook is worth more than a scribe. And a great cook might just get invited to taste test grapes before the caliph's concubines. Meals are power plays. Recipes are currency. And courtyards like this are stage sets for ambition, betrayal, and the occasional runaway goat. Right now, in this very courtyard, two women are whispering behind a lattice screen. They're veiled, elegant, and bored out of their minds. They're planning to leak a rival's stew recipe to the Emir of Zaragoza by way of his flirty messenger pigeon. Historians still argue whether this particular pigeon actually existed, or if it was just a metaphor scribbled in a poet's revenge epic. You glance back at the stew. The pine nuts have softened, glistening gold against the shredded lamb. There's a trick here: you don't toast them too early, or they lose their bite too late, and they taste like old furniture. The sweet spot. It's roughly 17 breaths after the apricots begin to collapse into the broth. Every family in this neighborhood has their own pine nut stew variant. Some favor quince, others swear by coriander root, boiled and smashed to paste. The vizier's neighbor once used pomegranate molasses and accidentally invented something that later got rebranded as Syrian wedding stew. He still complains about not getting credit. Underneath it all is the mortar and pestle philosophy of Andalusian life. Pound it, blend it, hide it. Even love letters are sometimes passed folded inside layers of bread dough. Your host's wife once slipped an entire almond cake laced with poetry under the seat cushion of a traveling musician. Back in the courtyard, the moon has risen higher, casting silver lace across the stone walls. The stew is ready. The boy turns to call the steward, but then hesitates. He takes a quick sip, smacks his lips, and smiles with one side of his mouth like a thief. He's done it. He's nailed the secret balance. Sweet, sour, nutty, rich, all held together by that whisper of lemon. The ladle dips in again, and you realize you've been holding your breath. One taste, and suddenly, the whole courtyard feels like a blessing. That pine nut stew isn't just food. It's a passport. a declaration, a tiny, bubbling rebellion against blandness. And just like that, dinner is served on low trays with soft flatbread, pickled green plums, and a side of questions no one dares to ask out loud. The next morning, you wake to the muffled clang of ladles and the sizzle of oil against copper. In the kitchen of a grand house in Cordoba, the stew from last night is long gone, scraped clean by servants and silently praised by guests who don't usually praise anything. But the real theater is just beginning, because today, a new piece of kitchen lore will be written, quietly and without witnesses, in the form of an argument over spoons. Yes, spoons. You shuffle through the tiled hallways in your borrowed slippers, the kind with curled-up toes that make you feel like you're always mid-cartwheel. You turn the corner into the main kitchen, and there they are. A row of gold-handled ladles gleaming on the wall like a knight's medals. One of them is missing, and everyone's pretending not to notice. The head cook. She goes by Tariq and has ruled this kitchen for 23 years, is not known for subtlety. She moves like a thundercloud and has the eyebrows of someone who knows where you hide your secret sugar stash. Right now, she's glaring at her sous chef, a plump man with trembling hands and the unfortunate habit of humming when nervous. So, she says, not even pretending to stir the pot in front of her, "We're borrowing spoons now, are we?" The sous chef goes pale. In Andalusian kitchens, borrowing a gold-handled spoon is equivalent to borrowing someone's diary, toothbrush, and backup camel, all at once. Especially this spoon, the one reserved for tasting stews on Fridays. When dignitaries from out of town show up and pretend not to be impressed, you find out later that the spoon wasn't stolen for tasting. It was used as a makeshift mirror by the vizier's niece, who needed to check her eyeliner before sending a suspiciously large bundle of cinnamon to a boy in Sevilla. Historians still argue whether this particular niece later became the mysterious cookbook poetess known only as the almond-eyed scribe. The timeline doesn't quite fit, but the rumors are too juicy to resist. Besides, her recipes always seem to include a hidden step that involves glancing at your reflection in oil. Meanwhile, in this kitchen, the tension is so thick you could cut it with a paring knife. And Tariq does exactly that. She slaps down a bowl of preserved lemons so hard the brine splashes onto the floor tiles. The kitchen freezes. Then, unexpectedly, she laughs. "I knew it," she mutters. "Too much cumin in the stew. Only the Friday spoon could have caught that." The room exhales. The sous chef resumes humming. The other kitchen hands resume their rhythmic chopping. You, still standing by the doorway with your hair smelling faintly of last night's stew, realize something essential about Andalusian kitchens. Hierarchy matters, but humor wins. Outside, a delivery boy arrives with a fresh batch of saffron threads wrapped in linen. He's got a knife tucked into his belt, not for defense, but for peeling tamarind. He's also limping, though whether it's from a kitchen accident or a romantic one is unclear. His cousin runs a spice stall near the city gate and says he once saw this boy sell a half pouch of paprika to a court sorcerer in exchange for a weather prediction. Inside the house, the gold-handled spoon is quietly returned to its place on the wall. No one says a word. But later that night, someone carves a tiny crescent moon into its handle. A sign, maybe, or a warning, or just the cook's way of marking her victories. Cordoba is a city of hidden flourishes, intricate lace carved into plain-looking walls, recipes wrapped inside riddles, dishes that look simple until they unfold on your tongue like poetry. Even the stew you had last night wasn't just stew, it was a statement. This household knows how to coax sweetness from meat and loyalty from lentils. You spend the rest of the afternoon in the herb garden, surrounded by buzzing bees and gossiping pigeons. One of the kitchen girls is grinding rose petals into paste for sweets. Another is plucking basil leaves, muttering about someone sneaking nutmeg into the rice pudding again. As the sun begins to set, a young man arrives at the back door with a small package wrapped in muslin. He won't come inside. He just hands it off, bows, and disappears into the orange light. Inside the bundle, a single dried date, split open and stuffed with pine nuts. Nothing more. Tariq takes one look at it and swears softly in Arabic. You don't ask questions. But later, you overhear her whispering that the boy used to work in her kitchen before he got too ambitious. Now he's with the emir's chef in Granada. And the date, it's not a gift. It's a challenge. You've never been more invested in the fate of a stuffed fruit. That night, the moon above Cordoba casts long silver shadows across the tiled rooftops, and somewhere beneath it, a conversation is taking place that will ripple across kitchens from Malaga to Marrakesh. You don't know it yet, but you've stumbled into the messy, spiced underworld of Andalusian spice smuggling. And your first clue, the man with the oddly bulging left shoe. You're walking through the market just after sunset, a woven basket under your arm and a vague craving for something with fig. The souks are closing, but not too quickly lingering for the last few sales. The late-night buyers, the people who trade coin for things that don't always come with a receipt. That's when you spot him. Short, hunched, eyes darting like a squirrel in a hat shop. His shoe makes a dull clink with each step. You follow, quietly, through the rows of shuttered stalls and into a narrow alley that smells like garlic, dust, and dreams gone wrong. He pauses at a door painted red, knocks 3 times in a pattern that sounds suspiciously like the opening rhythm of a Sufi folk song, and slips inside. You wait 30 seconds. Then you do the only reasonable thing a responsible adult would do in a foreign city at night. You follow him in. The room smells like cinnamon and trouble. A woman in a headscarf is counting clove buds with the intensity of a tax collector, and 2 men argue in hushed voices over the quality of saffron strands. You hide behind a stack of chickpea crates and listen. Turns out, the man with the clinking shoe is part of an informal network of spice runners, mostly kitchen assistants, street vendors, and retired camel handlers who smuggle rare spices along trade routes stretching from Damascus to Fez, not to avoid taxes, necessarily, but to avoid something worse, kitchen envy. You see, spice envy is the deadliest of all culinary sins in Al-Andalus. If a rival chef gets wind that you've found a new kind of cumin, a deeper turmeric, or peppercorns with a citrus note, sabotage isn't just likely, it's inevitable. Kitchens have been burned for less. Historians still argue whether the fire in the palace kitchens of 1098 was due to a chimney spark or a jealous cook accidentally knocking over a jar of chili oil near an open flame. The smuggler's code is simple. No measurements, no maps, no direct eye contact. You get what you get, and you'd better know what to do with it. The woman counting cloves finally looks up and speaks in a tone that suggests she hasn't been surprised by anything since the caliph's 3rd wife tried to bake falafel using pigeon eggs. "You're not from around here," she says, not looking at you, even though you're still hiding behind a crate of legumes. "But you smell like stew, lamb and pine nut. Vizier's household." You nod before realizing you haven't actually stepped out of hiding yet. This woman is good. She tosses you something wrapped in fig leaves. You unwrap it and find a tiny glass vial filled with deep red powder. "Berber cinnamon," she says. "Not the kind poets brag about. The kind that tastes like secrets." You're not sure what to say, so you just nod again and slink back into the market with your prize. Heart racing, head spinning. A kid runs past with a bread roll the size of a small turtle. Somewhere nearby, a flute begins to play. You clutch the vial tight in your hand and vow to never again underestimate the power of someone's left shoe. Back at the kitchen, you find Tariq waiting with her arms crossed. She doesn't ask where you've been. She just points to a pot and says, "You're on tonight's sauce. Don't mess it up." You grind the cinnamon into a paste, mixing it with garlic, wine vinegar, and a single drop of rosewater. It smells like danger and dessert at the same time. You drizzle it over a platter of slow-roasted pigeon stuffed with almonds and dried figs. The moment the sauce hits the hot skin, it releases a scent so intense that 3 kitchen boys stop what they're doing and just breathe. Later, you catch them stealing tiny spoonfuls from the edge of the platter when they think no one's looking. You let it slide. They're young. They haven't seen what happens when a batch of rare cinnamon sauce goes missing. Somewhere out there, the man with the clinking shoe limps down a dirt road, lighter now, but richer in ways no coin purse can measure. He's got a rendezvous in Ronda and a recipe to deliver one involving pine nuts, lamb, and just the faintest echo of rebellion. And you've learned your first major truth of Andalusian cuisine. Spices are memory. They carry stories, arguments, and soft threats. And the best recipes. They don't just taste good, they tell you who's winning. The next day dawns sharp and cloudless, and the kitchen is already buzzing by the time you slip inside with sleep still clinging to your hair. A fresh basket of coriander has arrived. A cat is curled in the ashes of last night's bread oven. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear the unmistakable sound of a royal courier throwing up behind the stables. Nothing new. But today, the whole kitchen feels slightly off balance. Whispers flutter around the stone walls like houseflies. Because today, he is coming. He, in this case, is not the Sultan. Not even the Vizier. It's worse. It's the Emir's cousin. A man whose taste buds are so famously unpredictable that entire court menus are rewritten based on his mood swings. He once spat out a honey cake because it reminded him of a sad horse. He is rich, powerful, and prone to very public burps. Naturally, the kitchen is panicking. Well, everyone is panicking except for one person, Rafi, the youngest cook in the team. Skinny, sharp-tongued, and usually banished to peeling onions. Rafi has just announced, in front of everyone, that he will not be preparing the requested partridge with saffron. He refuses, declines. Politely and very dramatically declines. I won't cook for someone who believes pine nuts are just crunchy almonds, he says, arms folded, eyes blazing with something between rage and a strong caffeine addiction. I have standards. A silence falls over the kitchen so heavy it dents a nearby jug of yogurt. The head cook stares at him, jaw twitching. Then what? She says with dangerous softness. Will you be cooking? And Rafi, grinning like someone halfway to execution, says, soup. Cue audible gasps. Somewhere, a tomato drops. Soup. For the Emir's cousin. That's like offering flatbread at a royal banquet. It's culinary heresy. Soup doesn't impress people, it humbles them. It says, here, you don't need opulence, just warmth. But Rafi is already chopping leeks like a man possessed. Into the pot goes a bone broth, rich and humming with age. Crushed garlic, toasted pine nuts, grated nutmeg, and a mystery ingredient from a tiny brown pouch that he refuses to explain. Magic. He winks. Within 20 minutes, the soup smells like home. If your home is a medieval spice caravan and your mother swore by saffron-infused lullabies, the Emir's cousin arrives exactly on time, flanked by guards and perfumed beyond logic. He sits. He glowers. He is presented with a steaming bowl of what he has not asked for. You watch from the shadows, barely breathing. The cousin takes a spoonful, pauses, blinks, and then smiles. A small one, a sneaky one, but a smile nonetheless. I see you've met my grandmother, he says. Turns out, Rafi's rogue soup was nearly identical to the one the cousin's grandmother used to make in Almeria decades ago. Same aroma, same texture, same peculiar garnish of chopped fig and pine nut. Whether this was intentional or the result of dumb luck is still hotly debated. Rafi never confessed. He just bowed and went back to chopping onions like nothing happened. Historians still argue whether this event marked a shift in Andalusian culinary politics from ostentatious feasts to heartfelt, memory-triggering dishes. Some say yes. Others say the Emir's cousin was just constipated and soup helped. Either way, Rafi's defiance becomes legend. Later, back in the kitchen, the others cluster around him, demanding to know the soup's secret. He just shrugs. It's not about ingredients, he says. It's about nerve. Most cooks fear being remembered. I fear being forgotten. You watch as he takes off his apron and steps outside into the dusk, whistling softly. That night, you sneak a taste of the leftover soup now cooled. Its flavors deepened, and for a brief moment, you understand what it means to cook with rebellion in your blood. The stew pot is cold the next morning. But something else is heating up rumors. And in Andalusia, rumors move faster than oil on a hot pan. You're in the storage cellar now, wedged between baskets of garlic and what might be onions or just very confused shallots. The air is damp. The walls are carved with faint doodles of chickens and forgotten love declarations. And somewhere above your head, someone is dragging furniture in a way that can only mean they're either rearranging the spice rack again or hiding a body. Probably the former. Probably. You've been sent here on an errand for Tariq. Find the missing scroll. The one with the pine nut stew base ratios, the dried apricot soaking time, And crucially, a note in the margin that reads, "Do not trust Tahira with the cinnamon again." You dig through bundles of scrolls, parchment, and recipe clippings held together with beeswax and prayers. Then you find it. But wait, this isn't just the scroll. It's several scrolls, and they're blank. Or they look blank. You tilt one toward the light, and something glimmers faintly. Letters, very faint, written in what appears to be lemon juice. You blink. You weren't trained for invisible ink? Historians still argue whether the use of lemon juice in medieval Andalusian cookbooks was common practice or the domain of the culinary elite. Some say it was practical, hide your best recipes from illiterate kitchen assistants. Others say it was romantic, a way to pass forbidden spice blends between lovers who weren't allowed to taste in public. You bring the scrolls upstairs, holding them like sacred texts. Tariq takes one look and nods solemnly. Ah, she says, the invisible batch. Apparently, this was standard practice once. High-ranking cooks in noble houses would write their true recipes in invisible ink, then leave decoys with slight alterations out in the open. That way, even if a rival kitchen raided your pantry or bribed your assistant, they'd never recreate your flavor exactly. The method for revealing these recipes varies. Some require gentle heating over coals. Others involve brushing with rosewater or milk. Today, Tariq uses steam carefully, holding the parchment above the teapot as curling letters emerge like ghosts in procession. You lean in close, eyes wide. As words begin to appear, boil almonds. Cool. Grind with vinegar, not water. Add 1 pine nut for every heartbeat before the second crow's call. Whisper the name of someone you trust into the pot before stirring. You pause. Wait, what? That last part. Tariq just raises an eyebrow. Don't question the method. She says, this scroll fed 4 governors and 1 poet who didn't believe in sleeves. If it says whisper, you whisper. It's not just recipes you're reading. These are personal notes, fragments of lives, heartbreaks, tiny victories, petty insults disguised as spice pairings. One reads, Tahira burned the lentils again. I hope she marries a bland man. Another, oddly tender. If you're reading this, I forgive you. Add coriander to the quince next time. And a third, never feed this to Nasir. He thinks cloves are evil. The scrolls aren't just culinary blueprints, they're emotional cartography, a way to map longing, envy, pride, and affection across something deceptively simple. What's for dinner? By evening, you're carefully copying a recipe for lemon-scented lamb stew into a new blank scroll, this time using your own code. You feel ridiculous, whispering names into a pot, checking your reflection in the broth, and adding 3 drops of mint extract for balance. But when you finally taste the result, something happens. It's not better. It's not worse. It's yours. And for the first time in a while, you realize why these cooks guarded their recipes so fiercely. It's not just the ingredients. It's the intimacy, the feeling of being known through flavor. Later, someone slips a folded scrap of cloth into your apron pocket. It's stitched with a single lemon in gold thread. No name, no message, just a lemon. You look up, but there's no one around. Just the scent of vinegar in the air and the faint crackle of coals hot enough, perhaps, to reveal another invisible truth when the time is right. You've barely recovered from decoding lemon ink scrolls when the kitchen throws you into its most ungovernable chaos yet. Gossip hour. Forget boiling lentils or dicing quince. This is the true rhythm of the Andalusian kitchen, pulsing through mortar and pestle, kneading bench, and fire pit. And it always starts the same way, with 2 junior assistants, a vat of chickpea mash, and a whisper you weren't meant to hear. Today, it's about the pigeon pie. You're chopping dates, the sticky kind, that cling like guilt when you hear it soft, hesitant, deliciously scandalous. They say he put saffron under his pillow. A pause. A giggle. Is that a euphemism? I think it's how he dreams about flavors. Or love. Same difference. You lean in, and the rest unfurls like a badly folded napkin. Apparently, the assistant baker Khalid has been spending an unusual amount of time around the fire pit, not baking, lingering, watching the stew rotation, and more importantly, watching Farah, the stew assistant with the absurdly symmetrical eyebrows. Rumor has it, He's been experimenting with pigeon pies, not for the menu, for her. She once said she liked the spice blend used in funerary breads, so he's been stuffing pigeon with cinnamon, fenugreek, and pine nuts baked under stone, cooled in fig leaves. Romantic? Yes. Creepy? Possibly. Successful? To be determined. Historians still argue whether food as flirtation was common practice in noble Andalusian kitchens, or whether this was just a regional quirk among staff with no access to private gardens or poetry tutors. Either way, the fire pit has become a confession booth. People drop by not just to warm their hands but to shed burdens. One girl whispers about hiding her almond cake recipe because her sister keeps pretending she invented it. Another sighs and says she used to make flatbread for a traveling lute player who forgot her name but still sings the recipe. You sit beside them now, knees to the ash-warmed tiles, cradling a bowl of lentil soup so thick it's basically emotional support stew. Someone's added pomegranate molasses. It tastes like regret and second chances. The air smells of slow-roasted lamb and singed gossip. Farah arrives, her hair covered, her sleeves rolled, and her mood unreadable. She drops a handful of coriander into the fire not for cooking, for ritual, for luck, for whatever magic happens when crushed leaves burn beside pinewood smoke. She doesn't say anything to Khalid, but she does leave behind a folded napkin. Inside, a few slices of preserved lemon, candied with honey and dusted with sumac. It's not a love letter, it's a response. You're suddenly invested in this subplot more than you'd care to admit. Later, back inside the pantry, you overhear the head baker sigh to himself. Ah, young fools, pine nuts are wasted on infatuation. They should be saved for vengeance or contract negotiations. You wonder what his story is. The rest of the day passes in a haze of storytelling and spice sorting. Someone found a mouse in the grain bin and declared it an omen. Someone else accidentally dropped a fig tart and insisted it was an offering to the household spirits. No one questions any of it. You start to realize the kitchen isn't just where food is made, it's where memory brews. And that fire pit? It isn't just for warmth. It's the center of everything unsaid. By nightfall, the pie is finished. Khalid never delivers it directly. It's left cooling on the windowsill, filled with pine nuts, rosemary, and something floral you can't quite name. Farah eats it, wordlessly. But the next day, she leaves him a jar of tamarind pickles with a scrap of parchment tied to the lid. 3 words. You still overbake. You wake the next morning to the yeasty smell of rising bread and the unmistakable sound of a screaming match in the alley behind the bakery. Someone's daughter has just declared she won't marry a man who doesn't know the difference between nigella seeds and poppy. Her mother is understandably furious, because in Andalusia, bread isn't just sustenance, it's reputation. And in this town, a woman's baking skills can shape her entire future or unravel it in a single, flour-dusted afternoon. You throw on your robe and wander down to the bakery. It's a squat little shop at the edge of the courtyard district. Its chimney forever coughing floury breath into the sky. The front counter is stacked with long, blistered loaves that smell like nostalgia and minor burns. Inside, 2 sisters are shaping dough with the mechanical precision of surgeons. Their fingers move so fast you half expect them to finish each other's loaves. You nod politely, but no one responds. Bakers don't talk during first proofing. It's bad luck. You learn quickly. Dowries here aren't just gold or land, or the occasional reluctant goat. No, a girl's worth can also be measured in her bread. Flatbreads stuffed with pine nuts and raisins, spiraled loaves scented with aniseed, honey-smeared discs pressed with floral stamps that vanish in the oven heat, but leave their scent behind. These aren't snacks, they're resumes. In some neighborhoods, families swap samples before they even consider a match. She shapes a tight crust is not just an observation, it's a compliment. A whispered one, often followed by a sigh. Historians still argue whether these matchmaking rituals originated in Cordoba's Jewish quarters or in the Berber outposts of the Sierra Nevada, but one thing's certain, if you couldn't bake, your options were limited to spinsterhood or marrying a cousin with too many goats. The girl from the alley, the one who yelled about Nigella seeds, is now inside, crying softly into a bowl of spiced flour. Her name's Layla. Her fiancé gifted her pickled lemons instead of her family's preferred pine nut sweets. A cultural faux pas so dire it's practically treason. Tariq walks in just then. She doesn't say much, just takes a bit of the dough, rolls it out, adds a handful of pine nuts, and folds in a bit of tamarind paste from a hidden pouch. Try this, she says. It won't fix him, but it will remind you who you are. Later, Layla bakes the loaf. You watch it rise, golden and swollen with promise, the crust crackling as it cools. She doesn't cry this time, just eats a slice slowly with a small smirk, as though reclaiming something no one else was entitled to in the first place. That evening, the alley is quiet again. The mother, the daughter, and the forgotten pickled lemons have all gone their separate ways. You linger by the bakery door, watching the sunset dye the walls saffron orange. And just when you think the day's done, a boy approaches with a cloth-wrapped bundle. He offers it without a word, then runs. Inside is a single loaf, spiral-stamped, studded with pine nuts. Tucked between the folds is a tiny scrap of parchment with the words, "Nigella isn't Poppy." But you knew that. You look up the street and see Layla, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway like a woman who just rejected 5 suitors and a poetry contest. You nod. She nods back. And that's the whole conversation. You return to the house with your bread and a quiet understanding. In Andalusia, baking is a kind of magic, the kind that writes your name into a lineage not of blood, but of scent, touch, and timing. By now, you've learned that Andalusian kitchens run on a blend of fear, love, and cardamom. But nothing, absolutely nothing, lights a fire under the copper pots, quite like a royal food poisoning. It happens on a cool, humming morning. You're dicing quinces for a breakfast stew and arguing with a kitchen boy about whether coriander leaves or seeds are more romantic. The answer is neither. It's mint. If you're serious, and fennel if you're lying. Then a commotion erupts from the outer courtyard. Fast footsteps, raised voices, the distant sound of someone retching with a great deal of pageantry. He's down. Someone whispers, "Who? The Sultan." No. Worse, the vizier's nephew, the one who writes poetry about figs. Chaos descends. The kitchen turns into a war zone. Pans clatter, cooks scatter. You're told to stop chopping and start thinking. What did the boy eat? Who plated it? Was the lamb undercooked? Did someone sneeze into the mint yogurt? And who added shellfish to the morning stew? The stew in question is still steaming in a terracotta pot, innocent and golden, like a cat trying to deny it. Just knocked over your entire pantry. You peer in. Scallops. In a breakfast stew. No wonder the poor lad is out there praying for death. Tariq storms in, robes flaring, ladle in hand like a royal scepter of blame. Who, she hisses, let crustaceans into a soup meant for poetry? Recitation and morning digestion. No one speaks. Even the soup bubbles less enthusiastically. You're all lined up. It's a full interrogation. Names, roles, last known ladle usage. The youngest assistant, barely old enough to roast garlic, properly trembles as he's questioned. Then a voice pipes up from the back. It was me. Everyone turns. It's the former butcher's apprentice, the one with a vendetta against poets. His reason. He rhymed olive with love it. And that's unforgivable. Historians still argue whether the incident was deliberate sabotage or just a deeply misguided culinary experiment. One theory suggests the apprentice confused scallops with golden raisins in a moment of sleep-deprived ambition. Another claims it was a passive-aggressive love note gone wrong. Regardless, the vizier's nephew survives, though he reportedly never writes another fig-themed poem again. A small mercy. After the incident, new rules are carved into a wooden plaque above the hearth. No shellfish before the second prayer call. Always double-check the quince bowl for cloves. Never trust a man who says, "It just needed more salt twice." But here's the real twist. The scandal does something strange to the kitchen. It bonds everyone tighter. You see, fear is a great unifier, and cleaning vomit off a mosaic floor at dawn is a kind of sacred team-building exercise. That night, someone bakes a pine nut tart with a candied fig on top. No name attached, but everyone takes a slice and eats in silence, together, as if to say, "We survived the stew." The apprentice is quietly reassigned to woodchopping duty. The vizier's nephew, now famously cautious, develops a fondness for boiled barley and nothing else. And the stew recipe, it disappears from circulation entirely. No one wants to touch it again, not even with a sterilized spoon. But someone, probably you, scribbles a note on the back of a discarded shopping list. Never mix bivalves with poetry. Pine nuts are always safe. Later, as you lie in bed with the faint scent of fennel still in your hair, you reflect on the new kitchen dynamic. Everyone's warier now. Yes, but also closer. There's nothing like a shared brush with culinary disaster to turn coworkers into conspirators. And somewhere, deep in the pantry, the leftover stew rests in its pot, cold and unrepentant. You don't throw it out. You just close the lid and lock it. By the time morning stretches its saffron limbs over Cordoba, the scandal of the poisoned poet has cooled, but the kitchen's appetite for minor chaos, still piping hot. You're wiping down a marble counter that hasn't been truly clean since the Caliphate's golden age when a shriek erupts near the olive barrels. My lemons are gone. The voice belongs to Zahra, one of the market girls who supplies pickled goods to the kitchen. She's usually unshakable, even once carried a vat of vinegar through a sandstorm without spilling a drop, but today, her composure is thoroughly zested. She holds up an empty jar, swirls it dramatically, and says the most accusatory phrase in the culinary world. "Someone has stolen my pickled lemons." You'd think she'd accuse someone of stealing a baby goat and eloping with a tax official. The kitchen stops. Entire ladles pause midair. Even the soup looks guilty. It doesn't take long for the accusations to begin. Pickled lemons are no trivial condiment. They're a culinary asset, sharp, mysterious, tangy with just a hint of threat. In this kitchen, they're used to balance sweetness, awaken old meats, and even seduce occasional diplomats. And they're worth their weight in pine nuts. One of the kitchen boys, Sammy, swears he saw someone bartering with a spice vendor near the market gate, offering lemon slices in exchange for a pouch of cumin. Whole slices, he says, wide-eyed, still glossy. No one admits it. Not the bakers, not the stew staff, not even the pigeon pie department, who've grown suspiciously quiet since Farah and Khalid started sharing pickling jars. So, you're sent to investigate. And that's how you end up trailing a girl in blue sandals through the spice market, pretending to admire dates while eavesdropping on criminal-level lemon deals. You finally spot her young, fast-talking, and bartering like her soul depends on it. She trades a jar of Zahra's lemons for 2 finger lengths of cinnamon bark, a sprig of stolen rosemary, and what appears to be the last pinch of Persian cumin in the city. You step forward to confront her. She doesn't flinch. "Relax," she says. "I wasn't stealing. I was reallocating." The kitchen's ratios were off. There was too much sweetness this week. Someone had to fix it. Historians still argue whether she ever worked officially in the kitchen. Some records suggest she was once a recipe courier delivering scrolls from Cordoba to Toledo, usually with jam stains in the margins. Others say she never had a job at all, just taste buds sharp enough to threaten established menus. Back at the house, Zahra is fuming. "You can't just steal lemons," she says, slamming a jar on the table. But instead of anger, Tariq tilts her head. Let her make something. Everyone watches as the girl sets to work. She toasts coriander, roasts garlic until golden, mashes everything together with the last few pine nuts from the pantry's emergency stash, and adds finally a single paper-thin slice of those scandalous lemons. She spoons it over grilled aubergine and flatbread. Silence. Then chewing. Then peace. The condiment is shocking in its balance. Bright but mellow, tangy but kind. Zahra takes a bite, sighs, and, after a very long moment, nods. "You still owe me a jar." "Deal," the girl says. "But next time, give me the good lemons." That night, someone carves a lemon slice into the side of the olive barrel. A warning. A tribute. Hard to say. The kitchen thrives on ambiguity. You lie awake in the corner room, watching shadows flicker on the walls, and wonder if you've seen the beginning of a new legend. The lemon thief of Cordoba, a girl with cumin dust on her fingers and rebellion in her seasoning. And just before sleep overtakes you, you dream of lemon, pine nut, and cumin folded into a pastry no one's dared to name. You're halfway through rolling grape leaves when the shouting starts. At first, it's muffled, something about soup rites and blind monks. Then a clang of pans, a clatter of sandals, and suddenly, two men burst through the rear courtyard gate, each dragging a brazier behind him like war banners on wheels. They are rival cooks. They are here to settle a dispute, and they are both wearing aprons embroidered with pine nuts, which means this is serious. You stand, mouth full of preserved fig, as they position their gear in the center of the courtyard. One of them is Yusuf, a former palace sous chef turned spice vendor, known for seasoning stew with ancient poetry. The other is Hamid, an aggressively cheerful man who roasts meats in the market and once sold pigeon pies to an emir who'd lost his appetite and regained it 5 bites in. Their feud, a matter of pine nut proportions. Yusuf claims Hamid has stolen his famous almond pine nut stew recipe down to the citrus zest whisper he invented during a sandal repair session in Almeria. Hamid insists he got it from his aunt, who couldn't read but could taste lies in soup. So naturally, it's come to this, a pine nut stew duel. Word spreads fast. By mid-morning, the courtyard is packed cooks, scribes, passing water sellers, and a noble woman pretending to inspect window shutters while clutching her shawl like a theater program. And then, of course, there's the judge, a blind monk named Basim, known for his absolute sense of fairness, his unsettlingly accurate memory for aromas, and oddly, his complete lack of smell. Basim hasn't smelled anything since a beehive fell on him during a honey festival. But taste is intact and terrifying. He sits quietly under the jasmine trellis, chewing a single pine nut like it contains secrets. The duel begins. Both men ignite their braziers. The scents begin to waft smoked coriander, browned onion, apricot slices dissolving into butter. Yusuf works with controlled precision. Hamid hums as he cooks, tossing in ingredients like he's conducting music. Both use pine nuts, but Hamid roasts Yusuf grinds his with sumac and wine vinegar into a paste. You're invited to ladle broth for the monk, a sacred task. You nearly drop it when he takes his first sip and mutters, "Too many ghosts." No one knows what it means. But Yusuf looks shaken. Then comes Hamid's bowl. The monk tastes, pauses, tastes again. Then he smiles. Neither, he says. A stunned silence. Yusuf's stew has the better balance. Hamid's has the better heart, but both forgot the simplest thing. He raises a spoon. They forgot to feed each other. It sounds like a metaphor, but then the monk laughs and adds, "Also, there's no bread." Where's the bread? Historians still argue whether this duel actually occurred. Some say it was staged for entertainment during a lull in court taxes. Others claim Basim never existed, and the story was invented by a guild of bakers to boost flatbread sales. But the truth is less poetic and more delicious. After the monk's declaration, Yusuf and Hamid stare at each other for a long, tense moment, then burst into laughter. They exchange spoons, taste each other's stew, grumble, nod. And then, to the audience's delight, they combine the two into a single cauldron, stir it like witches, and serve it to everyone. That night, the kitchen eats well. The stew is deep in layered smoky pine nuts, rich lamb, tart vinegar, soft apricots, a dash of chili oil someone may have added on a dare. You sit beside the fire, bowl warm in your hands, and watch Yusuf pass Hamid a folded napkin stitched with the words, "We should argue more often." By morning, they've vanished, gone their separate ways, but someone paints a pine nut on the courtyard wall with leftover quince syrup. The duel is over. The stew remains. It's late now, the kind of late where the moon hangs low like an overripe fig, and even the cats look sleepy. But you're still awake, drawn by something whispering behind the courtyard wall. Not words, scents. They drift on the night air. Bitter herbs, sweet citrus, something smoky, something illegal. You follow the trail past the cooling bread ovens, down the narrow path behind the olive press, and push open the creaky wooden gate that the kitchen staff swears leads nowhere. It does. It leads here. A secret garden, moon-drenched and lush, hidden behind high stone walls, overgrown and alive with murmuring leaves, a wild place, but not untended. No, this garden is cultivated. With intention, you step carefully around a fig tree twisted like a grandmother's hand, past rows of herbs you thought were banned, silphium, Angelica. Bitter almond. You spot a plant with soft pink blossoms you vaguely recall from a lecture on medieval love potions. Someone's been busy. At the far end, a woman is harvesting by moonlight. She doesn't look surprised to see you. She wears a dark robe, and around her neck hangs a pouch tied with blue cord faintly glowing. You think, though maybe it's the moon playing tricks. She nods toward the nearest bed of herbs. Don't touch the rue, she says, unless you're heartbroken or seeking revenge. Even then, be careful. You suddenly understand. This is the garden of forbidden flavors. Long ago, when Cordoba's rulers began banning certain ingredients out of superstition, safety, or sheer culinary politics, cooks like her preserved them. Hidden gardens sprang up across the city. Some grew rare spices. Others housed plants used in wedding broths or mourning pastes. A few were purely experimental, combining rosemary and rosewater to see what emotions they'd conjure. Historians still argue whether these gardens were acts of rebellion or preservation. Were the cooks protecting flavor traditions or crafting new ones? In secret, under the eyes of palace taste police, you trail behind the woman as she pinches off leaves with her bare hands, tasting, muttering, occasionally discarding entire stems with a scowl. We used to put betony in pine nut sauces, she says, before people decided it caused dreams too vivid for sleep. Personally, I liked it. At the garden's edge sits a stone basin filled with cooling broth infused with orange blossom and what you swear is ground oyster shell. She ladles a small amount into a cracked cup and hands it to you. You sip. It tastes like memory, like something you haven't eaten yet but already miss, like longing, layered with lemon. She watches you silently. Some flavors, she says, aren't banned because they're dangerous. They're banned because they reveal too much. You think of the kitchen, of the pine nut duel, of the soup Rafi served that made the emir's cousin smile and cry at the same time, of how many emotions you've tasted this week. She presses a dried herb packet into your palm. No label, just a faint outline of a pine nut inked onto the cloth. For your next stew, she says, use only half, unless you want to know what she's really thinking. You never ask who she is. You slip back through the gate, heart rattling like a jar of cloves, and close it quietly behind you. The forbidden garden disappears into shadow, like a dream you swear was real. And tucked into your sleeve, the packet pulses with scent bitterness, sweetness, and something unnamed. Tomorrow, you'll cook again. Tonight, you sleep with your fingers still stained green. The next morning, you wake to the metallic clatter of a mule cart and the sound of someone shouting about cloves. You're still half asleep, still smelling of crushed rue and roasted almonds. When you stumble outside and see them, the merchant caravans, a full procession, just rolling into Cordoba's lower quarter. Bronzed donkeys with jangling bells, veiled traders on foot, and carts stuffed with sacks of grain, dried citrus, and barrels marked with cryptic paint strokes. The air is instantly thick with the scent of dust, sweat, and cumin. But these aren't ordinary merchants. No, these are chef caravans traveling culinary nomads who deal not in coin, but in spice, knowledge, and rumor. They travel between cities and kitchens, trading not just ingredients but ideas. One of them locks eyes with you. He has a white beard twisted into a single braid and a thumb stained permanently with turmeric. He nods toward a cloth-covered crate at the back of his wagon and says, "Want to see something cursed?" You do. Of course you do. He peels back the cloth and reveals cloves. Not just any cloves. Black cloves the size of small olives, shiny and puckered and smelling like a monastery's library during incense hour. He explains, quite casually, that they're Berber cloves, harvested from a grove supposedly struck by lightning twice in the same month. You keep these near your pillow, he whispers. No bad dreams. You cook with them. Though, eh? He shrugs, like a man who's lost 2 wives to soup-related misunderstandings. Historians still argue whether this variety of clove actually existed, or whether it was invented by desperate merchants during a cinnamon drought. The debate continues. The cloves remain, and people keep buying them anyway. You help the caravan unload barrels of dried lentils and strange pickled citrus fruits that glow faintly when exposed to heat. In return, you're given a parcel wrapped in date leaves and tied with red string. Inside, pine nuts soaked in rose vinegar. You want depth. The bearded man says, use them with lamb, but only during full moons, never on a Thursday. You don't question it. You learn quickly that the caravan chefs operate on superstition, sensory instinct, and petty rivalries. One merchant warns you to never mix cinnamon with coriander unless you want your stew to taste like betrayal. Another swears by putting saffron under her tongue before tasting sauces, claims it aligns the chakras with the recipe's spirit. It's all wonderfully absurd, but you believe them. They tell stories, too. One man swears he crossed the Rift Mountains with nothing but lentil paste and prayer. A woman recounts how she once traded 3 cloves and a honey almond for a map that led to a sunken library of extinct recipes. You sit by their campfire that night, wrapped in a wool blanket that smells like cumin and goat, sipping tea steeped in dried lemon rind and lavender. Someone tells a joke about a chef who married a spice trader just to get access to his anise hoard. Someone else responds with a folk tale about a cook who could flavor broth just by thinking about the right herb. But one story makes the fire pop. A tale of a woman who once flavored her stew so powerfully. The man who ate it burst into tears, wrote a love poem, then immediately declared war on her village when she rejected him. Flavor. The storyteller says, wagging a cinnamon stick isn't always kindness. You remember the garden from the night before? The herbs no one names. The flavors that reveal too much. The caravan disbands by sunrise, leaving only muddy ruts in the cobblestones and a faint trace of clove and chili oil in the air. But in your pouch now sits a glass vial of oil made from pine nuts, rose, and ground tamarind. You've traded a story for it, and now it's yours. Later, as you slip into the kitchen through the rear gate, Tariq glances at the vial and says only, use it wisely, and never with lentils, unless you're ready to move out. You nod. Because in Cordoba, flavor is currency, and curses. Sometimes they just taste a little sweeter. By now, your fingers move through prep work without thinking, peeling almonds, smashing garlic, stirring stew in quiet circles like the moon's own assistant. But today, your spoon trembles slightly, because the kitchen is whispering again, and this time, it's about poison. You're wiping down the pigeon prep table when you hear it. 2 assistants hunched over a tray of candied rose petals, whispering between bites. She used perfume this time. What kind? Orange blossom, with clove, but not for scent, for steeping. You lean closer. They're talking about her Lady Naima, a noble woman known for her velvet slippers, her insatiable curiosity, and her increasingly unexplainable dinners. See, Lady Naima doesn't cook. She commissions, and lately, she's been requesting dishes with unusually precise combinations. Sweet milk with bitter almonds, pickled trout with crushed date pits, pine nut oil soaked with rose, and something darker. 2 weeks ago, her husband fell ill after a banquet, violently, dramatically, but not fatally. Last week, her cousin, who publicly mocked her pomegranate preserves, died suddenly during a plum tart tasting. Now, people watch her recipes the way you'd watch a cobra in a linen drawer. You don't want to believe it. But when she sends a scroll to the kitchen requesting a trout dish with pickled radish, pine nut vinegar, and powdered jasmine bark, even Tariq frowns. She's blending lines, she says quietly, between perfume and poison. You've seen it before, her ingredients arriving in velvet-lined boxes, glass bottles labeled, not with names, but moods, submission, regret, waking hour. You once uncorked one and had a memory of falling in love with someone who never existed. Historians still argue whether poison was commonly used among the elite in late Andalusia. Some suggest it was rare and always punished harshly. Others say women, lacking political voice, turn to kitchens and herbs for justice, or at least recalibration. You're summoned to assist with Lady Naima's trout. The fish arrives gutted and gleaming. The pickled radish smells unusually floral. You handle the pine nut vinegar carefully. It's thicker than usual, with a golden shimmer. The final step is the garnish. Candied orange blossom dusted with powdered jasmine bark. Not too much. Naima's servant says, too much of what? Exactly. You sprinkle, plate, and step back. She arrives shortly after veiled, perfumed, eyes like dusk. She doesn't taste the dish, just inhales the scent. Then she nods and leaves. You never hear what happened to the man who was meant to eat it. Later that night, you find a bowl on the prep counter, a quiet gift. Inside, Trout and pine nut sauce with a single candied orange peel curling like a sleeping serpent. No name, no note. You don't eat it. You don't throw it out either. Instead, you slip it under a glass dome and place it on the pantry shelf between a jar of preserved quince and a spice mix labeled Never Again. The next day, someone sketches a pine nut inside a perfume bottle on the kitchen wall. Beneath it, a single line. Not all bitterness is flavor. The wind howls through Cordoba like it's trying to undo someone's dinner plans. You're in the main kitchen courtyard, sleeves rolled, chest lightly dusted in almond flour, when a messenger bursts in hair windswept, sandals muddy, clutching a scroll like it contains the final instructions for humanity's survival. It does not. It contains the menu for the Great Andalusian Feast, held once every 3 years. The feast is a spectacular public affair. Courtyards spill with stews, rooftops roast lambs, musicians roam with date-stuffed pastries, and anyone without a dish to contribute is gently encouraged to visit their cousin in the desert. This year's feast is huge, and the vizier's house, it's hosting the final banquet night. You watch as the scroll unfurls across the prep table's 8 courses, 3 wines, 2 backup soups in case one causes crying, and a final surprise dish to stun the elite and silence the critics. The kitchen goes wild. Assignments are shouted, ingredients listed, spices summoned from dark jars labeled only if desperate. Everyone starts moving faster. The stew boys are elbow-deep in pine nut paste. The bakers have begun carving loaves shaped like doves and questionable metaphors. Someone's already roasting almonds over a flame that seems too enthusiastic. Tariq's in full general mode now. She paces. She barks. She briefly hugs a vinegar jug for strength. You're put in charge of flaming almonds for the finale. A dish so risky it's been banned twice due to past mishaps involving hair loss and unintended proposals. But spirits are high. Energy flows. Music hums from the back pantry. Then the ferrets arrive. Yes, ferrets! Someone, somewhere, thought it would be charming to release decorative ferrets dressed in silk into the courtyard during the dessert course. And now they're here early, hungry, curious, and fast. One climbs into a tray of candied lemon. Another knocks over the pine nut garnish for the saffron pudding. A third vanishes completely, only to reappear inside a flour sack with the expression of a being who has just learned shame. You chase one off your almond station just in time to prevent a fire. Barely. Then the sky darkens. A gust of wind hits the outdoor cauldron. The cauldron, the one with the surprise stew, simmered for 2 days straight. It rocks once, twice, and tips. You watch in horror as lamb, pine nuts, quince, and something secret and expensive spill across the mosaic floor like a medieval culinary apocalypse. Someone screams. Someone else faints. A ferret skids through the puddle like a noodle of chaos. Historians still argue whether the stew disaster was caused by the wind, sabotage, or the mischievous gods of overambitious menus. All anyone knows is that 30 minutes before serving, the vizier's courtyard looked like it had been hit by a very polite, very fragrant war. But the kitchen doesn't give up. No, everyone snaps into silent motion, grabbing trays, scooping what's salvageable, replating, reinventing. The flaming almonds are swapped for toasted pine nut brittle. The ruined stew is reborn as a tart topping. Someone even deep fries an old bread pudding and calls it a soul sponge. Guests begin arriving. Lanterns are lit. Harps are tuned. The ferrets are gently relocated to the spice room, where they fall asleep atop sacks of cinnamon. And somehow, the feast goes on. Laughter rises. Wine flows. The replacement dishes are applauded, even revered. One nobleman cries openly into a pine nut tart and says it reminds him of his grandmother's scarf. You and the others stand at the back, covered in soot, flour, and dried pomegranate. You're exhausted. You're victorious. You're wondering if the ferret in the corner is blinking at you in Morse code. Later, as the guests leave and lanterns burn low, Tariq raises a cup. We fed the chaos, she says, and it liked it. You sleep that night with toasted almonds in your pocket and the sound of applause echoing through your dreams. Dawn seeps into Cordoba like honey stirred slowly into warm milk. The feast is over. The ferrets are snoring in a linen bin, and the kitchen is silent. Not empty, never empty, but slowed, softer. You're sweeping pine nut shells from under the pigeon roasting table when you notice a small scroll tucked behind a basket of candied plums. It's old, wax-sealed, stamped with a pine nut in gold leaf. You glance around. No one's watching. You break the seal. Inside is a single recipe written in impossibly neat script, the ink faded but legible. It's titled simply, "The Final Stew," and beneath it, a note. This is not the best stew, but it is the one that must be remembered. The ingredients are strange, some ordinary, some near mythical: roasted garlic mashed with rainwater, pine nuts soaked in tea, lamb marinated in crushed rosemary and regret, a broth of wine, quince, and a single strand of saffron kept in your sleeve for at least a week. The directions are more philosophy than instruction. Stir only when thinking of someone you've forgiven. Salt to the rhythm of your oldest memory. Taste. Then taste again. Then ask someone else what they remember. You don't ask where the recipe came from. You just start cooking. The kitchen wakes around you, slowly, gently, no shouting, no scrolls, no emergency ferret extraction plans. You roast, you simmer, you grind pine nuts in silence, and as the stew bubbles to life, people begin to gather quietly. First one, then two, then 10. No bowls are requested, just small cups, a sip each, enough to remember the stew isn't perfect. It's not bold. It's not daring, but it's true. A kitchen boy sips and begins to cry softly, holding his mother's old apron. An elder baker dips her spoon and murmurs something about Almeria sunsets. Tariq tastes it, nods once, and walks away without speaking. You take the last sip. It tastes like every story you've heard, every night you've spent beside a fire, every pine nut you've ever toasted in joy, panic, or hunger. You fold the scroll, seal it again, slide it into the pantry wall behind the cracked tile where it will wait, quietly, for the next cook with questions in their heart. And you, tired but full, walk outside. The city is waking. Vendors call out. Brooms sweep doorsteps. Someone somewhere is already arguing about flatbread. You smile, because flavor fades. Even secrets fade. But someone, somewhere, will always want to know why the stew tastes like that. And someone else, maybe you will always be ready to whisper the answer. The sky now melts from orange to indigo. Even the jasmine vines seem to breathe slower. The kitchens are quiet. The pots cleaned and drying. The pine nuts tucked back into their jars like small, golden memories. You step outside into the hush of the courtyard, where candlelight dances across tile, and the warm air carries a final breath of lemon and spice. You sit on the low stone wall, listening to the city soften murmurs through shutters. A cartwheel in the distance, the familiar clink of bowls being stacked just right. You close your eyes and inhale deeply, letting the aromas and voices and stories settle. The ferrets, the forbidden gardens, the perfume-laced fish, the flaming almonds, they fade now into memory, quiet and satisfying. Like the final note of a lullaby, you don't need to remember every detail, just the feeling, the warmth, the soft hum of a place where flavor is language, and every meal tells a secret to someone who's listening closely. Your body relaxes, the wind barely stirs, and somewhere, in a kitchen far away or just in your dream, a spoon dips gently into a bubbling pot, and someone smiles. You are home now. Sleep well.